Greetings, Earth humans. It is I, Professor Phoebe Anarchy Xavier, world-reviled hip-hop artist, screenplay author, comedian, actress, and all-around hoot to invite over for a drink and a game of Strip Twister. I'm here at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology today, February 14th, 2012, to tackle my most delightfully absurd and enlightening work to date.
Yo. Sailing on a dream, ragtime gal. I was at the helm, she was sad, smile, pal. Time was spent for motives, outsource the guilt. It's a glorious tantrum, look at what I built. Bears on unicycles are the tamer, savior. So when the circus moves on, you can save or blame for any which direction that accepts the system. Life doesn't always work out quite the way you fixed it. Coming soon to drive-in theater that is no longer open. I'll be standing there rapping better than you were always hoping. One day to achieve yourself, but hey, it's a dream to be felt. Colorless green ideas sleep ever so furious. The afterglow foreshadow tantamount glorious. I'm smiling but the corners of my lips are downturned. The longest story still turned to powder. Now louder, louder, louder. Nobody goes home till we kill the cowards. Which means I'll be dead soon. I found my niche. Just so long. Thanks for all the fish. I know long after I'm dead and gone, you silly grand motherfuckers will be singing all along to the best 4 dozen of my stupid fucking songs. Don't you get it? That's the reason that I built this bomb. Heart is on my sleeve now. You can take a stab with that feeling of sadness only bus stations have. With that feeling 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 sadness only bus stations have. Jawbreakers, lawbreakers, they'll stake you out. Fall takers, ball breakers, they'll shake you down. Jawbreakers, lawbreakers, go face them out. Stormmakers, pause fakers, come on, take them down. Jawbreakers, lawbreakers, they'll stake you out. Fall takers, ball breakers, they'll shake you down. Jawbreakers, lawbreakers, go face them out. Stormmakers, pause fakers, come on, take them down. Every sponge stranger I see is a custody. Love on the kick down, come with the busty. But you don't really want to go that route, dude. But there's a reason or two. You should spank that too. But I slap the fucking TVs at your eyeballs tough. I slap a blind retard out of glasses done right. Come on, like you never seen a crusty punk fight. Steady, iconic like Walter Cronkite. Punch a paparazzi for Bjork on prom night with no remorse in these first-class gun sights. Excuse me, I get carried away like a broke jacuzzi. If I spit it, then I spat it. Somebody got splattered. Tongue twist the rainbow French kiss Anna. Nib high football rules, no joking. Savannah get a boob job, blow the smoke it. Ride this beat like a poop bazooka. Find your flow on the roots maneuver. I'm spinal tapping, I'm crank to 11. Stalkers at 9 o'clock, tea time at 7. Pencil and drinks with Chomsky next week. I've grown the social pulse wicked if I speak. Thanks to every last ear that listens. I've never read Hunter S. My house I've lived in.
So I just had the roast beef focaccia here at the Stata building, which is where Professor Chomsky's offices are upstairs. I still have about a half hour before I'm supposed to go up there. But because I ate, I'm going to have to redo my lipstick. I think maybe brush my teeth, smoke a cig, redo the makeup, come back in. You with me? Alright, let's do this. As a renowned scholar and professor in your own right, do you take difference with people in the entertainment industry, such as Dr. Dre, Dr. Seuss, or Professor Anarchy, benefiting from claiming these titles that we cannot back up with the usual educational background and paperwork that goes along with attaining such a title?
If you look at most of the people who are called doctor, there's nothing much to aim for. I remember my own family. My father was a Hebrew scholar, and his friends were all PhDs and taught and so on. My mother was, in her day, she came from a religious Jewish family. Women couldn't go to college, you know, so they allowed her to go to normal school, and that's as far as she could go. But she was very well educated, very smart, and when they'd have a dinner party at the house when I was a little kid, the men would sit in the living room talking, and the women would clear up the dinner and then sit in the dining room and talk. I always gravitated towards the women. It was much more interesting.
Even though they weren't doctors.
They weren't doctors, but they had interesting ideas. They were interested in the world. They talked about things. The men were mostly so boring, I couldn't stand it.
Maybe reciting what was in the newspaper today.
Not even that.
Not even that exciting. Okay. Moving on to question number 3. Which came first, the chicken salad or the egg salad?
Too hard. God must have created them together.
At the same time, God invented them both?
Yeah.
I think they both contain mayonnaise, and I'm not a fan.
Probably a section of Genesis that if you read it carefully will explain it.
That was actually both created, chicken salad and egg salad. Yes, and Cain and Abel lost track of it somewhere in their squabbling.
That's right. But it's hidden somewhere. Archaeologists will dig it up one of these days.
A lost gospel, perhaps.
Yeah.
Or Dead Sea Scrolls. Okay, question number 4. I borrowed from your legacy in recent years by using the line, "Colorless green ideas sleep ever so furiously," on a song that went on my second album. Which is more meaningless? That phrase, or voting in a system that only allows 2 political parties to participate in the public debates that help to determine the chief executive government official?
Well, they're meaningless in different ways. The colorless green ideas sentence was in fact constructed to illustrate a number of points. It was one of a long series of examples, but this one somehow caught on.
Involving the syntax?
Well, showing that things can be syntactically well constructed, but not semantically meaningful, and furthermore that they can be syntactically well constructed even if there's no a frequency relation between the successive words. So it's not that the second word is frequently follows the first word. And that was important at the time because it was generally assumed that the period of behavior psychology, that in a sense it's just a matter of setting up associative patterns. So it was against that, and it also happened to be chosen so as to show that certain other proposals about what makes a sentence grammatical aren't true. So it sort of encapsulated all of these in one. And to say that it's meaningless doesn't mean to say that you can't assign any meaning to it. Of course you can. In fact, I'm sure you did in your song. In fact, you can assign meaning to any sequence of anything that comes along. You can, the closing of a door, you can assign meaning to that. But the other statement is it's a well-formed English sentence, and there's an answer to it. Yeah, it's I wouldn't say it's totally meaningless, but it's has limited significance to vote for a system and to vote for choices that are given to you in electoral extravaganzas that are run by the public relations industry and run, incidentally, with the intent of deluding you. It's somehow people don't like to face, don't seem to be willing, don't think about it. But if you think about it for a minute, we're supposed to live in a market democracy. If you get a PhD, or what they call a real one, you learn that markets are based on informed consumers making rational choices. Anyone who's looked at a television ad knows that's perfect nonsense. The advertiser is trying to create uninformed consumers who will make irrational choices. In fact, hundreds of millions of dollars go into undermining markets. It's called markets. You look at democracy, pretty much the same. In fact, the same institutions, same public relations agencies that try to undermine markets also try to undermine democracy, and in the same way. Again, you learn in your 8th grade civics class that democracy is based on an informed electorate making rational choices. That's certainly not the case. Electoral campaigns are set up just as to delude people. That's a show, and of course the candidates themselves. We condemn Iran correctly because in Iran, though they have elections, the candidates have to be vetted by the ruling clerics. They have to pass through a filter. It's the same here. except here they have to be passed through the corporate sector.
I was thinking about how Goldman Sachs, I believe, is investing money into campaigns of both Republicans and Democrats, sort of hedging their bets that no matter which side wins, they're in their pocket.
Yeah, and usually they tilt one way or another. So in 2008, the financial institutions, which are a huge part of the economy now, they probably don't contribute much to it, maybe they harm it, but they're a big part of it. They tilted towards Obama, which is basically why he won.
Okay, yeah. So we'll see who they put more money in this time.
That's a pretty good predictor.
And they'll probably win.
Yeah.
Is it okay if I close this door a little bit?
Sure.
Thank you. Get some sound insulation.
Yeah.
Question number 5. The former USSR and People's Republic of China are often referred to as communist nations. In my understanding of communism, however, neither of those nations ever actually functioned with a form of government that would be rightly defined as communist. So it might be possible that a country that would claim to be a democracy, when in fact it is a plutocracy. How would we clearly analyze and determine if a nation is a plutocracy with the facade of democracy or an actual democratic republic?
We would ask who's making the decisions. Are the decisions made by, let's say, people in a town? So take, say, the New Hampshire primary, first primary. Here's a good test of what would be a democracy. In a functioning democracy, what would happen in the primary is that the people in the town would get together at a town meeting or whatever modality they use, and they would kind of hash out what they think the problems are and what like good solutions would be, and they might not all agree, it's complicated issues, but they'd come to some conception of what they would like a candidate to be. Then they would optimally pick someone from their own ranks to be the candidate, but if not that, maybe there's nobody who wants to take the job. They would allow candidates to come, but to come and listen. Okay. Can you keep it closed, Bev? Bev, would you mind closing the door? Yeah, it's okay to close the door. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's okay. If somebody wants to come, let's say, George Romney wants to come, they say, okay, you can come if you like, but we don't want to listen to you. You listen to us. Here's what we want. If you can convince us that you'll represent that, maybe we'll think of voting for you. But of course you ought to be recallable if you're not doing it. Okay, that would be a democracy. What do we have? Romney or whoever it is comes to town. First of all, his PR agents come and they set everything up, and big extravaganza. And he comes and they gather people together, and he makes some speech that somebody wrote for him. And anybody with a gray cell functioning knows it doesn't matter what he says. It's just it's structured and designed to try to delude people into voting for him. But then they decide, oh, maybe I'll vote for him, maybe not. That's very remote from a functioning democracy. And this runs all across the board. Mm-hmm. Furthermore, as the greatest American, the most famous, prestigious American social philosopher, John Dewey, who is no radical, is straight out of mainstream America, he pointed out that you just can't have, he said, until we have a situation in which all the institutions of society, like say a factory, are run democratically, then politics will just be the shadow cast by big business over society, which is approximately accurate. That's what it is.
I was using plutocracy actually with the idea of how lobbying affects the national government.
It's everything. I mean, friend Thomas Ferguson, political scientist over at UMass, great political scientist, has done the major work on the question of how elections are won and how policies are formulated. And what he's shown is, I think, pretty convincingly over a long time, a century, that elections. He says we should look at elections as occasions when groups of investors, the rich and the powerful, get together and coalesce and decide to invest on controlling the state. That's called an election if there's two blocks of investors. And you can pretty well predict who's going to win and what their policies will be by looking at those blocks of investors. And now it's more extreme the last couple of years, and it's just gotten ludicrous. So people are actually talking about it. But it goes way back. And then it's on from there. I mean, if you take a look at the executive branch of the government, federal government, it's mostly staffed by the representatives of, if you like, the plutocracy, big business, law firms that cater to corporate interests, some professors of the Henry Kissinger type who sort of do the dirty work for the bosses and so on. Furthermore, just plain investment decisions set sharp constraints on what a government can do. In fact, you can read this since the 1970s when the economies were kind of financialized, huge increase in speculative financial flows and so on. That creates what some economists have called a dual constituency. One constituency is the voters, the other constituency is the investors, who carry out I'm quoting from the technical literature, they carry out a moment-by-moment referendum on government policies. And if they regard the policies as irrational, meaning they don't contribute to profit, but they contribute to human welfare, they just vote against them. They vote against them by attacking the currency, by capital flight, changing investment decisions, and so on. And it's clear who wins.
Policy based on human welfare is irrational.
Yeah, but it doesn't contribute to profit.
Yeah.
In fact, that's it's stated almost exactly in those words. Like when, without shame, I mean, during the Clinton years, when there was supposedly great economic boom, Alan Greenspan, head of the Federal Reserve, testified to Congress on the great economy he was running. At that time, he was described as one of the world's greatest economists in history.
He just kept lowering the interest rate, right? That's all he kept doing.
He did some things that were sensible, but one of the things he said that was made sense was that was helping him achieve this great goal. He said was by bringing about greater worker insecurity. It's his phrase. As long as working people are insecure, they're not going to do things like asking for decent wages or benefits or decent working conditions or whatever, and that's good for the economy for some.
Yeah.
But it's quite frank.
I think we got a good picture of that. Thank you. All right, moving on to number 6. Is David Icke fucking crazy or what?
Who?
David Icke. Do you know who he is?
David
Icke.
Don't know who he is.
Icke. He is a British gentleman. He started out as a professional footballer, soccer goaltender, and I think he had a debilitating injury that ended his career pretty early in his 20s. He went on to be a newscaster and then an author. What he writes about, and I like his information a lot of times because he brings a lot of interesting stuff to the table first.
Where does he write?
Well, he wrote a book about I think his first crossover was called Children of the Matrix, and it was like sort of a 9/11 conspiracy. And this is what he does. He has a lot of good information about the events, and then like the next chapter he jumps into George Bush is a lizard shapeshifter from the 4th dimension. And it's like, at that point, I have to throw out the baby in the bathwater, and all of his information is no longer useful to me, because even if he had good information up front, then he's telling me about how the lizards from the 9th dimension.
Is this a literary device, or?
He believes it. He really believes it. And he's written like 15 books about like trying to detail the inner workings of these lizard shapeshifters who control the world. And I find that with some of the kids these days that are liberal-leaning and questioning certain aspects of the government and economy, that they'll have a lot of information that is worth looking at, and that it's like, yes, you're right about these 4 or 5 points, but then they jump into the deep end of conspiracy theory, where I can't even take you seriously anymore because they're talking about lizard shapeshifters. And
No, there's a lot of that. I mean, that's part of the result of a culture, a society of very atomized. It's a very atomized society. People are separated. You know, it's you and the television, so maybe you and the computer now or something. But so they don't interact. They don't think things through. The educational system is basically designed to drill you in factoids, not understanding. That's what's called No Child Left Behind. Pass exams, but don't have to understand anything.
just through memorization, not through development of thinking skills.
Yeah, right. Because you develop thinking, it's dangerous. People, actually, a nice comment by Ralph Waldo Emerson when in the early stages of the development of the mass education system, he was considering why the rich want to educate people, and he said their line is that we have to educate them to keep them from our throats. In other words, give them a special kind of education which will preserve our privilege and wealth. So that's what people go through. Then they've got the internet. All of a sudden, the whole world of data is open to them. But they don't have any framework or structure. It's kind of like walking into the Library of Congress and saying, okay, I want to be a physicist, or a historian or something. It doesn't mean anything. So you get the kind of situation you're describing.
Yeah. I have some friends that when I told them that question, they were hoping you would say, who's David Icke? Either that or yes. But he definitely is crazy.
People actually read him, right?
He's very popular, and amongst some of the youth that are have the right idea that the government isn't necessarily all about the interest of the people, but they're not lizard shapeshifters, in my opinion. I wouldn't take it that far. Question number 7. In a thick fog on July 28, 1945, a B-25 Mitchell bomber crashed into the north side of the 79th floor of the Empire State Building. The building failed to collapse or mysteriously destroy any nearby buildings. Did they not have potent enough jet fuel in the 40s, or not enough foresight to line the building with explosives?
Well, the question of, this is Building 7, if you want to answer that question seriously, you have to know a certain amount of physics, you have to understand some civil engineering, you have to know about the structure of the building. These are things you don't pick up on the internet. That's why they have graduate courses in these topics, because they're not trivial. So if you want to pursue that question, not with me, because I don't have the knowledge, go to the physics department or the civil engineering department and talk to them about it. But there is something that all of us can think through without scientific and technical knowledge. Let's assume for a moment that the Bush administration planned the whole event, 9/11. And that, if we know with certain confidence that their major goal was to find a way to attack Iraq, unless they were insane, they would have attributed the attack to Iraqis.
Not Saudi Arabians.
Then they would have had the free going, They get the whole country would say, great, let's invade Iraq, get a UN resolution, NATO would support them, you don't have to concoct any tales about weapons of mass destruction that end up discrediting you. Clear sailing. And furthermore, they wouldn't have gone on the sideshow into Afghanistan, which is kind of like a quagmire. So there's two possibilities. One is they didn't do it. The other is they're insane. They're not insane.
I think I would go with the second option myself. I think they're a little insane. I think if you were to undertake a conspiracy of that level, there has to be something a little loopy in your head anyway.
But why shoot yourself in the foot?
By blaming on the Saudis
This is an ally, after all. Caused them trouble. In fact, you recall, they had to fly the Saudi big shots out of the country in violation of the no-fly orders.
Bin Laden's family was flown out of the country that morning, I believe. Yeah.
So, unless you're purposely shooting yourself in the foot, it's different than being loopy, There's no indication that they purposely try to harm themselves. In fact,
harm the effort towards Iraq. Yeah.
and themselves, they undermine themselves.
Well, I would say two separate things on this, Phil. Is one, I might suspect that the 9/11 event was not directly related to the intention of going to Iraq, but it was more related to the intention of passing the Patriot Act, which was like a 600-page document that appeared out of thin air within 3 weeks.
But you could have done that just as well if you blamed it on Iraq. Even better.
I guess. But I also remember Colin Powell's concern from the very beginning of Bush's administration that within 2 weeks of being in office, he was talking about, like, well, what are we doing about going into Iraq? I was like, wait, we're at peace. You don't just attack people. That's not your job, Mr. President, to just start war. Like,
Yeah, but if you blame it on them, it would be open sailing.
that would more likely... Okay, I understand. Awesome.
So it just doesn't make any sense.
No, I see the logic, though. I definitely do. Number 8. Dorothy Parker once said, "You can lead a horticulture, but you can't make her think." That's not really a question. I just love Dorothy Parker.
I like her. She has some great lines. Let's see if I can...
A lot of them have to do with drinking and sex.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I'm enamored with
I
her.
can never remember funny lines, but she has some great ones.
Yes, she is very, very brilliant.
Yeah.
Really? Oh, awesome. I did not get to ask.
All right, kids. Phoebe, back on. Don't do drugs. I just got finished interviewing Professor Chomsky, and we didn't get to all my questions. So what I was going to do for you is read the questions that I didn't get done in the interview. His assistant, Bev, who is a lovely lady, came in exactly when a half hour was up. I think he was running behind today anyway. I was sandwiched between 2 other interviews. So, and I also already reviewed and found that the audio on the first question was out. So what we're going to do now is read you the questions that weren't asked, then read you the first question, and then we'll end the video with his answer to the first question. If you don't like that, you can eat a dick, bitch. So here are the questions that didn't get asked during the interview. In May of 2011, the media sold the public a story about the death of Osama bin Laden. I found the black beard that he was sporting to be slightly suspect. We need the lighter again. In most cultures, the long-graying beard is a badge of honor which the elder proudly wears. A constant reminder to those around him that he has decades of experience and knowledge that the younger generation has not attained yet. To me, especially in an anti-American and anti-Western organization like the Al-Qaeda, getting your beard dyed at age 54 seems like a very unlikely way to maintain the respect of your loyal minions. Do you think he was hiding his dialysis machine under the porn collection or under the pirate-esque black beard? Number 10. As a transgender woman, I sometimes encounter vitriol from people who claim to be followers of Jesus Christ, an outspoken proponent of peace, love, and acceptance. The phrase, "Judge not lest ye be judged," is attributed to Jesus in the best-selling book, The Bible. In your opinion, who would Jesus hate? We'll get this relit and move on to number 11. In producing the musical score that accompanies hip-hop rap songs, an audio sampling machine is often used in conjunction with a record player to make a new composition out of snippets or samples of available material. In composing a song for guitar, a guitarist uses the available notes. No guitarist that I know of invents new notes. Is rap music really music? And the last two questions... The last two questions I invented today, and we did not get to them. But here's number 12. The wording of this year's National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA, has been a point of concern for many American citizens the past couple of months. Many people I've encountered in the worldwide Occupy movement have seen it as a means for the government to declare peaceful protesters terrorists in order to detain them indefinitely without trial. Presumably, I would think, to smooth over the road for the coming Third World War. I have read both the questionable language in the NDAA and AUMF, which that wording is dependent on. It seems clear to me that in order for NDAA to be employed in the detention of United States citizens, one would first need to be identified as a member of a group that is defined by AUMF as a terrorist group or a foreign enemy. While I find it unlikely that exercising First Amendment rights would warrant such classification for the OWS protesters, I would be remiss to not at least question the possibility. How many more kitchen sinks will need to be arrested before we should start labeling America the new bastion of fascism? And number 13, Mr. Chomsky, it's taken me 8 months of exchanging emails with your office to finally arrange this interview, which now falls on Valentine's Day. Coincidence? I think not. Okay, guys, and I'm going to rewind you to the first question. I'm going to read that, and then we'll go into his answer for that, and that will conclude. I think that should conclude this video. And as far as professor versus professor, I guess he wins for kicking me out of the office before I could answer all the questions, right? Okay, so the question was, I was speaking at a bar with a young man who had attended Harvard that claimed that while he understood Latin, that it was impossible for anyone to speak Latin in the modern world. He suggested that it was a dead language, and the best we could do in contemporary times was to speak English with Latin words, that we could only overlay Latin words upon the patterns of our native tongue, but could not speak Latin as it was spoken 2,000 years ago. Can you please verify or debunk that claim for those of us who have never studied Latin or attended an Ivy League university? It's okay.
We can't speak English the way it was spoken 2,000 years ago because nobody was speaking anything like what we call English. We can't speak English the way it was spoken, say, 500 years ago, even though people were writing things that we can read. And in fact, my grandchildren can't speak English the way I do because they just speak differently. As far as Latin is concerned, it's true that there's no community of people who speak Latin, but it wouldn't be a great effort to reconstitute such a community. In fact, much greater achievements have been made. For example, right here in this department, a really remarkable achievement was made recently. There's one of the main languages in this area of the country when the colonists arrived was Wampanoag. Okay. Like most of the Native Americans, they were devastated, destroyed, decimated. But the remnants of the tribe still exist, but they don't speak Wampanoag. In fact, the language hadn't been spoken for a century. Mm-hmm. But one young woman from the Wampanoag tribe, Jessie Little Doe, and she was a student here, and she was working with a great linguist here. He's died recently, Ken Hale, who was a specialist, among other things, on Native American languages. And they and some of his students essentially reconstructed the language from similar languages that still are spoken, and from texts, missionary texts from a century ago. And now the language has its first native speaker for a 6-year-old daughter.
Oh, wow.
And if you can do that, you can reconstitute Latin.
We could recreate Latin
if
we
anyone
wanted
wants
to.
to.
Yeah. How about the Latin that was from Roman Catholic Mass? Would that have been similar to the ancient Latin?
Well, it's, never. I mean, it's not pronounced the same way, but structurally it's probably similar. Mm-hmm. However, it was probably somewhat an artificial language, not the languages that were spoken. The languages that are spoken are called vulgar Latin, meaning people speak them. Okay. It doesn't have any connotation. And those are what we call the Romance languages. they developed out of that?
That boy dropped out of Harvard anyway, so yeah,
Well,
forget that kid. He waited till the end of the conversation to tell me that.
I see.